Welcome boys and girls. In today's video we're installing a Torq Masters torque locker in our 14 bolt full float rear axle for the square body overland build. If you follow the directions and watch this video, it should be a straightforward install for you. So let's get into it. Cracking open the box. This is everything the locker comes with. This is one half of it. Comes with 4 springs, and then the second half right here of the locker. So as you can see, it kind of just goes side by side like that. Then the 4 springs go in there. You will be reusing 2 of your 4 spider gears, and then these will replace the other 2. In the box also came with pretty detailed directions and a few stickers, so the most important part of this. So a couple stickers and then the directions. These actually really go in depth on everything, so we will be using these directions to try to make it as easy as possible and to make this setup as simple as possible so we don't mess anything up. Since we are going with the stock 410 gearing this 14 bolt came with, we'll just be pulling out the carrier and going through the process of pulling the ring gear off and installing this torque locker. So starting off, we went through what came in the box, and now we're on to the most important step. As you can see, I've already marked one side red and one side white, so we know what is going on. But you have to mark each thing accordingly, so we know that this is like the red side, this is the white side, and then this would be the top, and that would be the top. And then as you pull it apart, you will keep them separated, but also take pictures, just so you have something to have reference if you happen to forget, or this carries out for a few days or whatever, then you at least have a reference. So I will be marking what's the top, what's the bottom for each side, and then slowly pulling it apart. And then I know these brass pieces, these retainers, have to spin. They spin to a certain point, so you can mark that with the paint marker on each side. And then once you get however many revolutions to the point of pulling the carrier, write down that number on each side. So it'd be 5 times or whatever. You could kind of go from there. But this is the most important step, so you don't have to take this to a shop and get it reset up and pay a bunch of money, because the point of us doing all this is to save money and learn these skills. So I'm going to get everything marked out, and then I will give you guys an update on how everything looks and how I did it. All right, I got it marked out, the top, the bottom, got all the bolts marked. Kind of unnecessary because I do have to pull it apart and re-torque it anyways, but I got them all marked out on both sides just to make sure we are good to go. And then I'm going to start pulling this thing apart. Pull off the retainer first, obviously, and then start pulling off these retainers, and then from there we could get into it. All right, as you can see, I pulled off the bearing retainers on each side, and the bolt that came off with it I put to the corresponding side, top and bottom. All right, so checking it out, you do have to spin these loose, these bearing retainers. I marked each hole to where this retaining clip would go, and then from there I did three lineup marks, 1 on the bottom, 2 on the top of each side. And then you got to spin it loose. So I'll get a screwdriver in there and just slowly spin it loose, get it backed off to a point where you could pull the whole carrier out, and then we can inspect the bearings and go from there. All right, so I got it loosened up enough to be able to pull the carrier, and what I did was I just marked a 1 on the housing on each side, and it did do 1 full rotation of loosening this. And then from there, the race comes out with it, so you will need to put the bearing race back in. So to mark it, just so you don't get them switched around, I did some marking on both sides, so when you pull the carrier, the race will come with it, and then you know what to put back in. So this should be good enough to pull the carrier, and we will see. All right, I got the carrier out. This side actually took 2 full spins of this bearing retainer. So the plan now is I want to clean up this housing. It's a little gross. I'm just going to be gentle with that though. You know, just be really careful because I don't want to use brake cleaner and get rid of any of these paint marks. So yeah, I'm just going to take my time with this and really clean this up. And same thing with the bearings on the carrier. They don't look bad. I don't really see any pitting or anything like that, or any wear marks or anything like they got hot. So I am pretty happy with the bearings and the races, but I'll just need to clean them up really well. And once I have all this cleaned up, then we can split this carrier and get to installing the locker. I got all of the ring gear bolts off, and right there, I don't think it matters about the order of the ring gear bolts. Just have them torqued to the right spec, and obviously use red Loctite. So that's why I'm going to clean the carrier and all the threads, the carrier, both sides, and the ring gear. I'm going to clean it extremely well along with the bolts so I could red Loctite it and torque it down to spec so those don't walk out on me. So now what I'm going to get to is I got to get the ring gear off. So I think I'm going to take the dead blow hammer and just lightly smack it to work the ring gear off, and then we could separate the carrier. I took my dead blow hammer and a pry bar and just hammered on the edges of the ring gear, and it fell right off. So before I fully split the case, I'm going to grab the ring gear and clean it up really well with brake cleaner and let it start drying, and then from there we could split the carrier and install this locker. We got the carrier separated and fully cleaned up, everything other than the carrier bolts or the ring gear bolts. I do not need those spider gears anymore or the thrust washers they come with, but you do need the drive spider gears and then the thrust washers that those come with inside there. So I just pulled it all apart to clean it up really well. And we are at a pretty good spot. I'm going to clean up these bolts really fast, and then we will start assembling this carrier and ring gear. One thing that I got to say is make sure all of this is extremely clean, because you do want to use Loctite when putting this back together. And then you do want to mark it. So I marked this right here, and then the mark is still on the ring gear. And then you want to mark also this half of the carrier. So you want to mark all 3 of them so they match up. I used a file just so I could scuff the metal, since I knew I was going to be cleaning all this up with brake cleaner. But I will clean these ring gear bolts real quick, and then we'll start putting this thing back together. Okay, so with all of the bolts cleaned now and the ring gear clean, I cleaned them both with acetone just to make sure there was absolutely nothing in them, any residue whatsoever. What you do is you take 1/2 of the case and you put in 1/2 of the locker with 2 of the springs in place, and then from there you take the spider, get it all lined up, drop it in there, and then from there you take, this is where it's going to get a little tricky, but you take the other half of the locker and you set it in place just like that. Make sure everything is lined up, which it is. Then you take the other drive spider gear with the thrust washer and you set it on there. And then that is together. Then you take the carrier and you Make sure it's lined up first of all. And you get it back together. The carrier is back together, and then from there you would want to flip it and set the ring gear on there with where you scored it, or where I scored it and where you marked it. Get all of that lined up, and then from there you would flip it back over and get the bolt started. Once I got the ring gear over the lip of the carrier, I was actually able to move it with my hands. So see, just like that, so I could line it up with the bolt holes. And so my plan now is I'm going to take the bolts and I'm actually going to put them all in there with the washers to suck this carrier and the ring gear together tight. And then from there, back out one bolt at a time, red Loctite it, put it in there tight again, and I'll do that with all of them again. And then from there, we can torque them all to the torque spec of, I think it's 130 foot-pounds. If that is wrong, I will notate it on the screen now. But up to 130 foot-pounds, so it'll be torqued, and then I'll mark it all with the paint marker to make sure no bolts back out. And then from there, we could put this carrier back into the housing. Got it torqued down to 120 foot-pounds, and that sucked. But it is all done. Now I'm going to mark every bolt with the paint marker. Then we could get this bad boy back into the housing. All right, we got all of the bolts marked. Now put the whole carrier on its side. Got to put the races in place. And then from there, let's lift it in. Get it in place. Let me twist this race around, get it lined up. Perfect. And then this one, I actually wiped off all of the red paint for that race, but it is in place. Now the next step is we got to tighten these up. I got to do 2 full turns, tightening up the right side and 1 on the left. So could be wrong, but I think this is the right way to do it. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to wipe off all the junk that is on that to tighten it up. Get it somewhat kind of sort of tightened up, or wiped up, not tightened up. All right, there is the first revolution around. Now I will keep wiping it, get it as clean as possible. I mean, tearing it apart this much, you're gonna want to clean it up. All right, I'm starting to see some paint marker. Now get it lined up for the second one. And those bad boys are all lined up. Okay, there's the 2 revolutions. Now let's do this side. This side goes the opposite way, but I will wipe off a majority of the grease and the nastiness. Get it down a little bit, wipe off some more, just try to get it looking pretty. And boom. Cool. The white side fully lined up, and the red side, sorry, getting in your guys' way. It's looking good. So I'll wipe off what I can, clean it up, make it pretty, and then it's time to put on the bearing caps. This is the top. You're gonna want to red Loctite these also. So what I'm gonna do is take a rag, stick it in these holes, and just wipe the crap out of it. Try to get out as much of it or all of it as possible, because I'm out of brake cleaner. But I'm gonna wipe up as much of that as possible. Red Loctite it, put those in there, and then we will torque these down to whatever torque spec it calls for. Got the bolts and the holes cleaned up. Now just need to get them started. Put a ton of red Loctite on there. Get them started with the socket. That one's a little bit harder to start. Get that snug with the socket, and then from there torque it down to the required foot-pounds, which I will actually tell you guys right now so I can have it right the first time. 135 foot-pounds. Yep, 135 foot-pounds. So I will get those started, get some red Loctite on them. I'm just going to put a bunch. Whatever, they're thick, heavy-duty bolts, so I shouldn't have to worry about snapping them or anything crazy like that if I have to put a little bit of heat on them. That housing just cut me. Jeez. That is a sharp cast for the housing. All right, get these snugged up. Oh gosh, okay. Got them snugged up. Wipe the blood off my hand. Then now adjust the torque wrench to 135. We're gonna do this real time for you guys. Okay. All right, get up out of the way. Oh man, I'm sore. Okay. All right, start snugging these up. Get them pretty well snug. Well, I'm bleeding everywhere. Okay, do this guy one more time. All right. All right, that one's torqued. That one's torqued. Give it a couple clicks. All right, play it safe. And boom. Those are done. Now, these should line up in there like a glove. All right, that lined up also. Beautiful. Okay, get those bad boys in place. I think it took a 3/4, nope, not 9/16 or 15. Took a 13 mil. Sorry for shaking the camera. Let me see if these have a torque spec. I'm just going to snug them down. All right, got that snug down. You guys are gonna see all of this real time. Bearing caps, cover, brake backing plate, pinion bearing cage to carrier. Nope, differential bearing adjusting lock. Diff bearing adjusting lock. Okay, these are 20 foot-pounds, so that was a 13 mil. All right, I had to bust out the little baby 3/8 torque wrench. These are 20 foot-pounds, so get them snugged up. There we go. Got some red Loctite on there also. Don't want these bolts to walk out, and then those bearing. Okay. Double click there. Double click there. And boys and girls, that is the install of the Torq Masters 14 bolt torque locker. Not extremely hard. Just make sure if your differential is a nasty one, get a lot of brake cleaner, maybe even some acetone to help clean up threads. But we are done with this bad boy. We got the disc brake conversion done so far and the locker installed. Now the next step is installing the axle shafts and using the stage 8 fasteners. I will have a link down below to everything I used in this video, you know, the locker, whatnot like that. Maybe a link to the Torq specs page that I found on a forum. But we're all done. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you for following along with this build, and I will catch you guys in the next video. See you guys.